Hola a todos. Bienvenidos. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, welcoming you to today's session of En Casa con la Plaza, our 3 times weekly, sometimes 4 times weekly, series of presentations, conversations, demonstrations, and performances brought to you by the great people at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, currently closed, tentatively set to open the end of this month. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, we're bringing these great personalities to you, to your homes, to your smartphones, laptops, whatever device you have, and to get educated. That's what we're going to be doing today. We have today with us el Dr. Álvaro Huerta, Associate Professor of California State Polytechnic University. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself, but I'll just let you know he's not only a professor, he's also an author. He's also a commentator. He's been published and or quoted in the LA Times, Inside Higher Ed, Counterpunch, LA Progressive, Color Lines, Fox News, LA Taco, and LatinoLA.com. So without further ado, let me introduce you, or let me hand it over to Dr. Álvaro Huerta. I'll be stepping back. I'll be looking at your comments on Facebook Live. I'll be sharing to my homepage so that as many people, if you're on Facebook, share it to your friends. Share it start a watch party. You're going to be really not only entertained, you're going to be educated, and you're going to get activated. Take it away.
Gracias, Abelardo, y gracias a, this is a bilingual program, so if you want to learn Spanish, gracias, Abelardo y La Plaza for all these great programs that you do. I'm a big fan of what y'all do in terms of the food, the culture, the arts, everything that you do for our people. So I really appreciate it. Abelardo, the executive directors, the board, and everything that comes with it. And I really appreciate everybody who's signed up. This program is brought to you by Coca-Cola. I'm just kidding. I'm just drinking Coke so I can stay awake. So I wanted this first part of the presentation is going to be more informal. I'll go through some slides. I'm not going to spend too much time on each slide because I have several slides. And I'll try to keep it light and heavy at the same time. I'm going to do both. But if at any point anybody wants a copy of the slide, for $9.99, you can get a copy. I take EBT cards and I take Square and credit cards and everything like that. So being part of the informal economy, I'm willing to share. I'm just kidding. Just email me and I'll be willing to share my PowerPoint presentation. So today's presentation is not just my story. It's a story of people of Mexican origin in this country. It's about Black people. It's about Native Americans and others that have been historically marginalized in this country. The great historian, Dr. Juan Gomez Quiñones, provided a brilliant quote that I want to share with all of you in terms of starting off this presentation about anti-Mexicanism. So this idea of it's a form of nativism that is practiced not only by the original colonizers of this country, but also by the inheritors. And this is what we talk about, when we're talking about white privilege. Now, I must admit to all of you, when I don't know about you, and I think all of you probably feel the same way as I do, when I first saw the video, the video of Mr. George Floyd being tortured by a police officer or a cop, I could not watch it. I could not bear to watch it. It was something for 6 minutes and 48 seconds. It was something that I must admit I could not watch all of it, and I didn't. I saw enough to see that a human being was being tortured in front of us. And for black and brown people, this is not new. The only difference is it was recorded by a very powerful 17-year-old girl, teenager, that videotaped it. And I literally cried, and I couldn't take it, when he was calling for his mother, who passed away. Here he is, a strong black man, calling for his mother because he knew his life was being taken away. He didn't sacrifice his life for us. Whoever said that, that's a lie. He was taken away from us, from his family, from his community, from his children. And because of that, overnight, the world changed in front of us. Because of this killing, and because he couldn't breathe, just like Rosa Parks, when she decided that she wasn't going to stand up and move to the back of the bus, it was a pivotal point in American history. And it's a turning point for a lot of people. Not for black and brown people, because we've always known this existed. But this is a turning point because black and brown people have been killed by police since the beginning of the founding of this nation, and Native Americans as well. But because of this video, the 6 minutes and 48 seconds, we see that white people, black people, brown people, Native Americans, young and old, took to the streets to protest it. So for me, I believe and I strongly support Black Lives Matter, period. Without any but or if or anything, period. Because black people matter and their lives matter. So to me, the fact that he couldn't breathe and the cop continued to put his knee on him, it illustrates the severity of the problem in terms of racism in this country, institutional racism. Now, when the mayor and the black police chief cried on TV, being appalled by Mr. Floyd's death, I asked them, why weren't you appalled that chokeholds were legal in your city? That is appalling, that the chokeholds were actually legal, that you can choke somebody, just like the African American in New York who was choked to death for selling cigarettes, sticks. So don't come to me with your white or black crocodile tears and talk about how a black man was taken from us when you allowed your cops to kill him because chokeholds are legal, because there's immunity for police. So we need to stop with this racism against black people, against brown people, and against others. In the mid-'80s, I used to love listening to this brilliant poet. Not that many people know of him, but he was brilliant, Gil Scott-Heron. And I want people to don't do it now because I'm talking about, like, after this talk, is to listen to him on YouTube and look up for a poem for Jose Campos Torres. And Gil Scott-Heron was a brilliant spoken word artist, musician, poet. And in 1978, he wrote about a Chicano who in Houston was killed by the police, by the cops. He was a Vietnam vet. He was in his early 20s, and he was killed. I don't want to play it during this time period, during this period that I have right now, or this time, because of the nature of the language. But once you listen to it, you're going to realize that forget about the language. The fact that a Chicano was killed by the cops, that act of violence is worse than the words that Gil Scott-Heron, brilliant poet, says when he talks about, and when he says, I said I wasn't going to write no more poems like this, about the pigs in the street killing Chicano and black. And he says it over and over, and it makes you cry. It made me cry because he said something in the mid-'80s that I experienced growing up and I saw in my neighborhood. And I love the fact that a black man was giving tribute to a brown man, and that's what I believe. In solidarity, where black, brown, white, Native Americans come together and protest the killing of any human being, and especially those of color, because this is what our people experience more than others. So when the ROTC comes to high schools to recruit black and brown people to join the military, and when they do join, especially women, they get sexually abused, they get sexually harassed. And they're there to protect our country, but at the same time, they're being harassed. And this is what happened to Vanessa Guillen. Not only was she harassed, but she was killed. But why wasn't there a press conference by the military base in Texas? Why didn't they inform us that another Chicana was harassed, sexually abused, and killed under their supervision? And so to me, why is it that we continue to serve the military when the military doesn't serve us? So it's not just about black people. It's not just about brown people. Oppression is oppression. You know, growing up, my brother and I, Salomón Huerta, great artist, Chicano artist, we love sports. And when we were young, we didn't know any better. You know, but now I know better. And I know that in sports, the owners, which are usually white privileged men, use Native Americans as their mascots. So we must protest the NFL team from Washington. I don't want to say the name because the name is derogatory, but we must protest that we live in a country where traitors, Confederate traitors, have statues. Traitors to the United States. I was born in this country. I'm an American. Yet there's traitors and there's Confederate flags, and even when the Mississippi flag that's being taken down against the United States, but yet because of the racism in this country that's deep rooted, just like a American pie in baseball, racism is a pastime. So we must do away with all racism against all people, against the Native Americans, against the Asian Americans that are being blamed today because of COVID-19, and they're experiencing the same racism that our people experience when we talk about black people and brown people. Now, for me, I've been studying this idea of framing and linguistics for some time now, and this is a brilliant professor at recently retired George Lakoff, and he talks about frames and how we frame things. And he argues that frames are mental structures in the way we see things. We're not talking about it too much right now because everything that's going on with COVID and Black Lives Matter and the killing of Mr. Floyd and the killing of black women, black LGBTQ women as well. So it's not just men being killed, not just black men and black and brown men, not just black boys and brown boys, but also women too. But when we talk about framing, let's think about what happened a couple of years ago, not that long ago, in terms of the caravan and how framing is used in this country. So the dominant framing, the dominant narrative, epitomized by the orange man in the White House, also known as Donald Trump. For the record, I'm not racist against anybody. I love all people, white people, blacks, Asians, and everything. But I have a problem with orange people. And so far, I just found one orange person that I don't like. And so the framing here, according to Trump and his complicit GOP party members, is that when we're looking at framing and how things are framed, in terms of the caravan, the Central Americans coming to the United States, we have the so-called aliens coming in national security crisis. It's a threat. So when you frame things that way, that means that we need to invade that country. That means that we need to send the military. So that's one frame. People like myself and others, and I'm sure all of you that are joining us, all 100 of you and 99% are probably my family, because I have a big family. We reframe it in a different manner, in a sense of resistance. So no, it's not a question of aliens or national security. It's a question of forced migration. It's a humanitarian crisis that Central Americans are coming to this country because their countries have been decimated with violence, with poverty, with gangs, and the same gangs that came from the United States to begin with, like Mara, MS-13, for example. They were born in the United States, so they were exported to Central America. And let's not forget that the United States invaded Central America, Nicaragua, El Salvador in the early 1900s, in the 1980s. And even when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, they invaded and they overthrew the democratically elected president of Honduras. So the United States created this chaos in Central America that caused this forced migration. So I'm just going to show a few examples of anti-Mexicanism. And like I said, I'm just going to go through these slides quickly because I have so many. But if people feel free to email me, it's easy to find me because Trump already found me. That's why I haven't received my stimulus check. That's another question. And I'll go ahead and email it to you. If we're really going to talk about invaders, the true invaders of this country come from this country in terms of the invasion of Mexico. First in 1836 when they took over Texas, and then in 1848 when they took the rest of the Southwest of the United States. So the Yankees are the true invaders. Central Americans and Mexican countries coming to this country, we're not invading. If anything, we're like those hummingbirds. We're just coming home, Like Mike Tyson, he has these birds, these hummingbirds that they just send out and they eventually come home. We're just coming back home to our motherland. But throughout history, we talk a lot about black and white racism and the black and white paradigm about racism, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. In the case of Mexicans in the early 1900s, during the Great Depression, over 2 million Mexicans were deported. 60% of them were citizens. And during the mid-1900s, when the United States engaged in World War II and thereafter, there was a need to bring agricultural workers from Mexico to the United States. So first, in the early 1900s, they deported my Uncle Juan, and now in the mid-1900s, they want them back. So it's the contradiction of the American, the hypocrisy of the American. So they deport us when they want to get rid of us so that they can free up the few jobs for the white Americans. But then when they want us back because the white Americans are fleeing the countryside and they're going off to war and they're going to the cities, then they want us back. everything I talk about is not just academic for me, it's personal. My father was a bracero. It's a guest worker program. 4.6 million Mexican immigrants came to the United States to work on not just the agricultural, but also the railroads, Washington, Oregon. My grandfather was a bracero. My uncles were braceros. And another case in terms of, let me go back to a little bit of braceros. What's cruel about this, not just the housing conditions that they were housed in terms of how deplorable they were, but the fact that they were sprayed with DDT in Mexico before they came to the United States. Now, DDT causes cancer. And these are men like my father who are proud men. And these proud Mexican men from the countryside, they don't strip naked in front of others. But the United States made them strip naked in front of their compatriots. And they sprayed them with DDT, which causes cancer. And this is the way you treat your guests? Another case of anti-Mexicanism, and I do a lot of my research on Mexican history, both in Mexico and the United States, because that's my clan, that's my peeps. But I'm also aware that, you know, the Central Americans and others in the United States, that the Puerto Ricanos that make up the Latinos in the United States. So I'm aware of that, but that's just my specialty. The Zoot Suit Riots in the early 40s, you know, indicate another case of anti-Mexicanism. And I get this paradigm of anti-Mexicanism, you know, coming back to Professor Juan Gomez Quiñones, but others have written about it. But it wasn't the Zoot Suit Riots. It's a misnomer to say Zoot Suit Riots, because it implies that Zoot Suiters were rioting. No, it's riots. The Navy, the cops, the white mob were rioting against the Zoot Suiters, the Pachucos. But during the same time, during the Bracero program, the United States was importing my uncles and my grandfathers and my father. In the cities, they were deporting Mexicans once again during Operation Wetback. That's the name of the program. Under Eisenhower, one of Trump's racist heroes, where over 1 million Mexicans were deported, the majority being the citizens. All my life, I grew up, I was a sports fan. I love sports, all sports, even like when crickets fight against each other. I just love sports. But it's hard for me to root for the Dodgers because in the mid-1900s, before Dodger Stadium was constructed in 1959, there was a Mexican community there in Chavez Ravine. And there's actually 3 barrios within Chavez Ravine, but Chavez Ravine, puro Mexicano. In this case, you know, we see them being forced out of their homes, and some were bought out. They gave them money to sell their land. But this is a form of violence. Forced eviction is a form of violence. And if you look at third base right there with the Dodger Stadium, my tia was born there. Órale, tia. She was buried there. I'm just kidding. The horror continues. It's like Captain Kurt said, Colonel Kurt said in Apocalypse Now, the horror continues for our people, for brown people, for the Mexican people in terms of ICE, of separating families, of going to schools and courts and separating families. I'm surprised they haven't gone to the churches. That's probably next if Trump gets reelected. So today we're crying for a lot of injustices that are taking place in the country, but I ask, who cries for our people? Who cries for the children in cages? So this is a case of the dehumanizer and the dehumanized. And Paulo Freire, the great Brazilian educator, he taught me something that I didn't think about until I read his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And he said when those in power dehumanize the oppressed, in the process of dehumanizing, they themselves become dehumanized. So those that are oppressing our people, those that are putting our kids in cages, in the process of doing that, they themselves are losing their humanity. And this is a great illustration by Dr. Alberto Ledesma, who works at UC Berkeley. So this presentation, or part of it, has to do with criminalizing, brown bodies. It's my brother Salomón Huerta graduated from Art Center in Pasadena, UCLA art school, where he received his MFA in art at Art Center and DFA. Good-looking guy right there. He kind of looks like somebody I know. So when Trump and his ilk talk about Mexicans sending their drug dealers, when it comes to framing, what we don't want to do is to accept the language of those that are racist and to say, for example, oh, I'm not a drug dealer, I'm not like them. Because once you do that, then you accept the frame. So we need to reject the frame altogether. Once you say, oh, not all Mexicans are, there's some of us that are good. Like, I went to college, I'm good, I speak English, I'm assimilated. Once you do that, then you're accepting the premise, the racist premise. And this is coming from a man that is a sexual predator, that, in terms of the Orange Man in the White House, that brags and boasts about grabbing women by their private parts, that has cheated on all his wives. So we need to reject this idea that we're rapists, that we're criminals. Here's the painting my brother did of my mother, my late mother, and my late father. So this idea that we're criminals, drug dealers, we're rapists, the premise of all of these comments are racist. So we need to reject them altogether. At the end of the day, all groups have bad elements. In the case of the Nazi, they're all bad. But we need to be clear. The fact of the matter is that the majority of people that migrate to this country, especially the working class, come here because they were forced, because of poverty, because of U.S. imperialism, to make a better life for themselves and their families, and to be denigrated this way from a president who has an immigrant wife and her parents came to this country because of chain migration, became citizens. We need to expose them for their hypocrisies and not accept the racism and reject it once and for all, without apologies. So for me, the personal is political. So the following have to do with my own experience, my family's experience, but I'll try to tie in also how it relates to other people as well. In the case of the Mexican in particular, it's like the Irish, like the Italians, Chinese, and other ethnic groups. The further you're back, we're all the same. In terms of, when we think about the family, we don't think about the nuclear family. We think about extended family. But if the family was an Olympic sport, the Mexicans would be getting gold medals for the first time, because we don't really get a gold medal. I think the only gold medal we got was for walking, like walking fast. But for the Mexican, it's the extended family that matters. It's not the nuclear family. Son los abuelos, tíos, tías, primos. We even have like first cousins, second cousins, comadres, compadres, padrinos, madrinas. When it comes to the family, we don't mess around. This is a picture of my grandparents. And I didn't know, my cousin sent me a picture about that my grandfather was part of the UFW. I didn't know that. It's a good looking couple here. My parents are from Michoacán, Sajo Grande, Viva Michoacán, from the rancho. They took this picture in the mid-50s, I think in 1954, and they went to Morelia. And back in the day, they didn't mess around. Like everybody in Morelia, not in Morelia, but in the countryside, in the ranchos, they all carried guns. You can see my father had a gun. Part of it because they had to police their own, their own land, and they didn't have like police like the way we know it now. So in the 1960s, my parents migrated. There was a family feud in the rancho. There was killings on both sides. They killed my tío Pascual. I never met him. I have a tío Javier and others, and my father included. They shot people. They got shot. So once they killed mi tío Pascual, they left. My grandfather took the family and went to Tijuana. Some of them stayed in the rancho. Some went to Morelia. But a good part of them went to Tijuana. El Cañón está en la Colonia Libertad. Now, I don't mess around when it comes to family, and my family don't mess around. We're just like, in my family, there's immediate family, there's 8 of us. I have like 10 aunts and uncles. They all have 10 kids. So I have like literally like 100 first cousins here. And sometimes it's kind of hard to like, when we have parties, so like, Maria, is that you? But luckily everybody's named either Maria and Jose, so half the time I get it right. But during this time, my father was working as a bracero in the 60s, and my mother was a domestic worker going back and forth. So we lived in Tijuana. Actually, I was conceived in Tijuana, but my mother was smart. She was a brilliant woman, Carmen Mejia Huerta. She was brilliant. No formal education, but she was smarter than all my professors that I've had all my life, smarter than me. And she decided that she was going to have me here in the United States. So I'm what Americans, or what the Republicans call as an anchor baby. So I was actually born in Sacramento. I'm kind of too skinny to be an anchor baby, but whatever. So she had me in Sacramento because she was cleaning houses in the United States. She was going back and forth. I don't know how she got to Sacramento, because I should have been born in San Diego, but that's a different story. But once I was born, then 40 days later, I came back to Tijuana. I actually wanted to stay in the United States because they had like hot water and air conditioning, but whatever. I didn't have a choice in 40 days. So we came back, and here's a picture of my brother, world famous artist, Salomón Huerta. He's a little bit more famous than I am, but I'm better looking, so it's okay. It kind of evens out. So Salomon's to the left, and I'm the little one to the right. And there we are, like shooting guns, just like my parents in the rancho. And then we eventually, because I was a citizen, both my parents had work permits. But even if they didn't have work permits, I don't care, whether they're documented or not. It doesn't matter to me. They decided to relocate to Hollywood, and we as an extended family. Many of us, and myself included, lived in Hollywood. There's like literally 3-story house, this craftsman home in Hollywood, and like it was like 30, 40 of us. It was just incredible. One of my uncles, he was a coyote, and it was smuggling, like the family business, and smuggling pollos, and that's what they called them. But that's just part of my legacy. But I was little at the time, and my mother, she didn't want to move. She didn't want to live with so many people. She wanted her own independence, so she applied for public housing in Bow Heights, and she didn't know any better because she didn't speak the language. That she applied to one of the most dangerous public housing projects in the entire country. Ramona Gardens housing projects, also known as Big Hazard. Because of the notorious gang, Big Hazard. And I say this with all due respect. It was very notorious, very dangerous. And when I say that, I'm not even offending them. That's what they're known for. But this was what I was not born into, but I was raised. I came here when I was at Ramona Gardens. I was 6, and my brother Salomón was 8, and my other siblings, were different ages. But him and I, we're closer in age, so we were the ones that hung out. So everybody from the projects, grew up. Not grew up, but everybody in projects attended the same elementary school, Murchison Elementary School. And literally everybody there was poor and on welfare. Now, when you're poor and you're Mexican and you're on welfare and everybody else around you is the same, you don't even know that you're poor, Mexican, on welfare. Because everybody's the same. I mean, we didn't even think about it that way. And now, in retrospect, thinking back about it, I think about this racist idea when people say, oh, college is not for everybody, it's not for everyone. They're talking about us. They're not talking about white kids in the suburbs. They're talking about us, black and brown people. Like for Murchison, literally 90% of the people, they didn't even graduate. They're lucky if they graduated high school. Because we were all for the projects. We didn't have any role models or anything like that. So graduating from high school, we had like a quinceañera. It was like in quinceañera, we killed a pig and everything. Like it was a big deal graduating high school. Nobody thought about going to college. It wasn't even an idea. Luckily for me, my brother was good in art and I was good in math. So that kind of helped us. It projected us to like the top of the class. And so when I graduated elementary school or finished elementary school, I was like top of my class. But and then I got bused. Half of us got bused to an all-white school in the suburbs, Mount Gleason in Sunland, Tujunga, and half of us got bused to El Sereno. And for the first time in my life, this is like that group therapy for me. So thank you for listening, everybody. So the first time in my life, I learned that I was Mexican because I didn't know. I knew I was Mexican, but I didn't really think about it. When we got there, the kids from the projects that were shipped to this all-white school in Sunland, Tujunga, in the suburbs of LA, they started throwing rocks at our bus. And they started calling us wetbacks and lowriders and beaners. And because I didn't know what racism was, I knew what poverty was because we lived it. And then I looked around and it's like, you don't like lowriders? You don't like beans? I didn't even know like lowrider and a bean was an insult. It's like funny. Like, what are you guys talking about? Like I didn't even know. But then I figured it out. Oh my God, they're putting this down. And the first time I heard, that derogatory term. We knew like in the projects, sometimes when you internalize racism, you call each other these negative names, but not lowrider and beaner. So growing up, like I said, I reference a lot with my brother Salomón, but I have younger brothers and I have older sisters, and we're all really close. So it's not like a preference thing. It's just that we share the same room and we're closer in age. But with my brother Salomón and I, it was like Rui Acuña's the title of his book, from UC Cal State Northridge, is Anything But Mexican. Like literally growing up, we wanted to be black because everything that we looked up to was black. Basketball, football, Muhammad Ali. And then later, myself getting into politics, Malcolm X. And even Bruce Lee, he's not black, but that's like, but we didn't. The closest we had to being Mexican was like Speedy Gonzalez or something like that. So when I think about it and reflecting the way we grew up, and not just my family, but my neighbors, the homeboys that I grew up with, childhood homeboys, some that joined the gang, some that didn't. It reminds me of Friedrich Nietzsche when he talked about the abyss. And when you look too much, when you stare too much into the abyss, and then looks back at you. And that's like, it's something that as a kid, that you don't understand, that it just transforms you and you don't understand why. So throughout my life, people have asked, okay, oh, Alvaro, they were just like, they actually always say like Alvarado, they always change my name. Oh, Alberto, it's Alvaro. Why didn't you join the gang? They're like amazed I didn't join the gang. And I say to them, well, these are paintings for my brother too. I say to them, well, actually, I joke about this. I submitted my gang application, but it was rejected, because I was too skinny. I was always been, even today, I'm too thin, My gang application was rejected because I couldn't defend the hood. So I got rejected. So that's why I never joined the gang. Physically, I didn't have the physical attributes to join the gang, so I never did. It wasn't that I was smarter or anything like that, or I thought it was good or bad. It was just that I couldn't. That wasn't something that I would survive in. So these are amazing paintings that my brother did. They're like life-size paintings. These are some of the homeboys and homegirls that my younger brothers, Noel and Ismael, are friends with, or they know. Um, but when I was going back to my mother, when I was 13 and my brother was 15, they sent us, my mom told my father, oh, I want you to take Alvaro and Salomón to Malibu to work as day laborers so they can know what it is to work hard and they can appreciate school. Now, my brother and I, I was good in school. My brother, was good in art. And, we were okay. We didn't get in trouble or anything like that. And then one day my father took us to Malibu to work as day laborers, and we didn't know what that was. But we got up like at 5 in the morning. It was just torture. Like I thought it was like those camps where those white guys pick you up and they take you to a camp, wilderness camp, to straighten you out. But we weren't doing anything wrong. But my mom was brilliant. She was a genius, and she said if they know what it is to work hard, then they're gonna focus on their school. So one day my father took us, and then I was so traumatized by the experience of waking up at 5 in the morning, 2 hours to get to Malibu from East LA to West LA, and then work for 8 hours, and then every hour checking my watch. It's like when I used to go to church, I used to check, okay, when's this going to end? It was like, okay, they're hugging. It's like, okay, it's almost over. They're passing the money. Okay, we're all home, people. So after the grueling hours of working as a day laborer, pulling weeds all day for rich white people in Malibu, then I said to myself, I'm too lazy to be a worker. I need to go to college. So a friend of mine, Hector, who's my childhood homeboy, I had a few. It was Javier. And when I was in elementary school, Ivy. So I used to hang out with some guys that they were pretty tough, and they came from tough families, so they had respect. So nobody really messed with me because I was funny, and it helps being good looking too. So, and hanging out with guys that had some respect. But Hector decided one day that he wanted to leave the projects, and at a certain point, I wanted to just stay. I was like, okay, it's cool, I'm okay. I told him, but Hector goes, no, I gotta go, man. I gotta leave, and I was like, I don't know about that. So he got this flyer, Lincoln. He used to work at the office at Lincoln High School, and he got this flyer like going to Occidental College, 6 weeks for free. They pay for everything. And I just didn't believe it. And I was nervous leaving where I live because I was already used to the guns, the violence, and everything. But Hector, like, no, we got to get out, So he peer pressured me in a good way, but he peer pressured me to fill out the application. And I was like a genius in math. I was like the next Einstein. But when it came to reading and writing, I was like the next Forrest Gump. I was like terrible. I didn't know what a noun was until 11th grade. And then he forced me to fill out the application. I didn't know how to write at all. I couldn't write one paragraph. So I got the application, like threw it in the trash can and said, this is not for us. We're from the projects, man. And then he went and picked it up from the trash can. He literally ironed the application, made me fill it out. I fill it out. I send it. I don't know what this has to do with my talk, but I'm saying it anyway. I send it out. A month later, I get a big envelope. Congratulations, you've been accepted to Occidental College, Upper Bound. 6 weeks, I was 15 years old. 6 weeks, we go and we live there. Everything's free. And for the first time in my life, I saw someone, Carlos Chavez. He was kind of light-skinned, so I didn't think he was Mexican, but whatever. My brother, Noel's a light-skinned. My mother's light-skinned, so they're Mexican too. But it's the first Mexican that told us that we can go to college too. But despite the fact that Hector and myself went to Upper Bound and we're kind of already being pushed to the university, being introduced to the university, we still have to experience violence. We still have to come home. So in the barrio, in the hood, in the ghetto, in the projects, police abuse is omnipresent. For a lot of white people, when they see Rodney King getting beat up on television, that's the first time they see that. Or Mr. Floyd getting killed, that's the first time they see that. But for us, it was every day. There's a brilliant painting that my brother, Salomón, painted, based on a master painter with the homeboys killing pigs. Here's another painting my brother did with a gun that my father owned. And when I was 16 years old, I experienced violence. I witnessed it in the home and outside of the home. But when I was 16 years old, my sister gave me a Mustang, a 1967 Mustang. And I was driving. I was teaching myself how to drive because my dad didn't know how to drive. So it's not like he taught me, like, hey, son, let's go drive. I had to teach myself how to drive. So I'm learning how to drive. And I did a rolling stop, and the cops were following me, but I didn't know that they were following me. And they pulled me over, and when I got out of the car, they pulled the gun on me. I was 16 years old. It literally could have killed me. Literally, if I would have ran out of fear, because there's this fight or flight, this instinct. If I would have just fled out of fear, I would have been shot. I would have been killed, like the homeboys that are being killed today in Ball Heights that are not being reported, that are not being protested, like Mr. Floyd's death. But unfortunately, and I told this to a Republican black reporter that interviewed me, with Peterson, he's the conservative Uncle Tom. I told him the story, and he says, "Oh, you were traumatized." I said, "No, I wasn't traumatized. Now, I'm not trying to be a tough guy or anything, but when you witness violence every day, it becomes normalized. So my childhood was taken from me because of the police, because of the state violence. And even when I got home, my mother knew there was no internet back then, or Gmail or anything like that, or Twitter. She even said, like, "Oh, I heard that in Spanish, like, oh, la policía te paró, con la pistola." I go, "Sí." He goes, "¿Qué quieres comer, mijo?" I say, "Oh, frijoles," like beans. And so it's all too familiar for us, In 1992, I'm sorry, there was a homeboy, Arturo Smokey Jimenez, who was killed by the police. He was unarmed. He wasn't my friend. Like I said, I'm always honest about things. But he was a friend of my brothers, my younger brothers. Because a lot of times in neighborhoods, you're friends with people like your own age or your own grade. So he was younger than me, but my brothers knew him, and he was killed by the police. But there came to a point where I needed to get out. So at 17 years old, I applied to UCLA and I got in because of my math skills, and I was afforded that opportunity because of Upper Bound, because I had a few good teachers, and because Chicanos from the projects belonged there too. So UCLA wasn't doing me a favor. I was doing them a favor because I was diversifying the university. And for the first time in my life, I met a Chicano professor, Dr. Juan Gomez Quiñones. In my mind, in my perspective, my expert opinion, one of the top intellectuals of our time, up there with Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, people like that. And he introduced me to other Chicano and Chicana authors. I read Occupied America. Later I read, Borderlines, La Frontera. I learned about people of Mexican ancestry beyond Pancho Villa, like Ricardo Flores Magón, and people like that. So I started protesting, and I started getting involved as a mechista, part of Mecha, as a student activist. I'm right there. The guy with the sarap is the good-looking dude, the skinny guy there. Even when I look at him, I say, damn, that guy's good-looking. I'm part of Mecha. In 1987, we even had a hunger strike because they wanted to cut the financial aid to undocumented immigrants. And we didn't even know back then. It wasn't like today about DACA and undocumented. Back then, it wasn't a big issue. And then later, like some of our friends would say, "Oh, I'm undocumented." But to me, it didn't matter because half my family was undocumented at a certain time. And my uncle was a human smuggler. So it wasn't like a big deal. But their aid was getting cut off, so we started protesting. So after that, after 2 years, I left the university, not because of grades, but because I wanted to become a community activist. So I started organizing gardeners in 1996 in the city of LA. And when I say this, I'm not saying this as an individual. I joined a group, or I was part of a group that together, Chicanas and Chicanos, in conjunction with immigrants, we organized together. So it's a collective effort. It's not an individual effort. It's a collective effort. In 1996, the city of LA wanted to ban leaf blowers. 6 months in jail, $1,000 fine, and a misdemeanor charge for using a leaf blower. So we organized against that and we won. And because of the lessons learned that I learned from there, I led the efforts in Southeast LA in general, and Southgate in particular, in 2000 to defeat a power plant in Southgate that they wanted to build. After that, I went to work, or not work, but to study and to pursue my master's at urban planning at UCLA. And that's what I did after organizing for several years. And then after that, my wife, Antonia, decided, wow, you know, you're kind of an antisocial. Why don't you just continue your education? And I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So we ended up going to, well, I went, but, you know, she went along with me. My son, Joaquin, he's he's smarter than I am. He's at Amherst College now in Massachusetts, #2 ranked private liberal college. I'm still paying the financial aid. So after this, I'm going to pass around the hats and try to get some money to pay for his tuition. But that's another story. Received one of the few Mexican Americans or Chicanos to receive a Ph.D. in city and regional planning from UC Berkeley. And then now I'm proud to be an associate professor at Cal Poly Pomona as part of the Cal State system. Unfortunately, when it comes to Latinos and Latinas, only 4% of us are tenured. Only 4%. In a state system, the biggest state system in the country, where out of the 23 campuses, 21 of them, 40% are Latino and Latina. But in terms of faculty tenured, it's only 4%. I don't know why I say 4, 2. It's 4%. That's what happens when you drink that. 4%. 40% are students, are raza, but only 4% are faculty Latino and Latina. This is why I consider myself a scholar activist, where I don't forget, like some of my colleagues, unfortunately, that teach at elite universities, the same ones that I attended as a graduate student, that they forget, you know, where they came from. But I don't forget. Even though they tienen el nopal ahí, they forget that they're Mexican. In that, for me, I want to make that bridge between the academy and the community. I have one foot in the academy, but one foot in the community. So as a scholar activist, I advocate during a few TED Talks that I've had, advocate for gardeners, street vendors, for the undocumented, you know, for people like George Floyd, Mr. Floyd, and others that have been victimized by police abuse in this country that suffers from systematic racism. It's not just a few bad apples. It's not the cops a few bad apples. It's like, oh, no, it's systematic, meaning that it's prevalent in the country. And if you're not black and brown, if you didn't grow up in the hood, if you didn't grow up in the barrio, then you don't know what I'm talking about. So sometimes you just gotta sit down and listen. So today I'm a strong advocate of fighting for a bill, AB 1460, in California, where one 3-unit course will be required if the Governor Newsom signs the bill. It already passed the Assembly and the Senate. Starting Monday, he has 14 days to sign, July 13. If he signs the bill, then all students at the California, at the CSU level, the Cal State level, will be required to take a 3-unit class, one 3-unit class, 3 units out of 120 on ethnic studies. And it could be African American, Native American, Chicano, Chicana, or Asian American. That's it. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? So just to conclude some of the slides, these are my last 2 slides. So I feel that I'm not the leader. I'm not the one that's going to take us to the promised land. I strongly believe there's the Chicanas and the Latinas, just like Sotomayor said, in terms of the whites, Chicana and Latinas. So what is to be done? We need to be bold, everybody, fearless, uncompromising. For los de abajo, use your privilege, protest, speak out, contact Newsom about ethnic studies, and defeat Trump in 2020, the hustler in chief. And more than anything, buy my book. This is the most important thing that you could do. It's like going from darkness to lightness, defending Latino immigrant communities. Muchas gracias. Gracias, Abelardo, en la Plaza de la Raza. La Plaza, I'm sorry.
La Plaza de Cultura y Artes.
Gracias. Despensa. This is what happens when you're quarantined.
That's okay.
La Plaza.
I get it confused myself sometimes, no, but not that often. But thank you very much, El Doctor Álvaro Huerta, for that fascinating, really, you delved into a lot of different topics, the anti-Mexicanism, the Black Lives Matter movement, the oppression of our people for so many years under an official government. But how you, through your hard work, through your circumstances, were able to find your way out, not only for yourself, but also for your family and also for your community. And for that, we thank you so much. We have a few questions here and a couple comments. If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and
Oh, sure.
Sure. Let's see. If you could say,
I paid half of the people that are saying good things, so just so you know.
Well, we do have a few, and I'm going to take a few from our Zoom. We had almost a record number, 105 participants on Zoom. Quite a few on Facebook Live from La Plaza, and plus watch parties. Max Barrera, excellent speech. He's coming in from Mexico. Wonderful talk from Isabel Rojas Williams. Thank you, Isabel. A question, if you could say anything in support of your Latinx students to your white faculty peers, what would it be? Well,
let me just say this. When I watch the news, when I watch TV, when I see what's happening on the streets and people protesting, I love the fact that it's not just Black people protesting, it's not just brown people, but it's white people, it's Asians, it's all people coming together. So to me, I don't see this as a white and Black issue, white and brown. I see this as a conscious issue, people of conscience. So what I say to my white colleagues is that to be in solidarity with us, and it's not enough to be non-racist, but you have to be anti-racist. It's not enough to be on the sidelines. Educate yourselves by buying my book, reading Cornell West, reading the new Jim Crow, and all these brilliant scholars that are out there, and educate your community, your people. Because a lot of times we're just kind of speaking to the choir, right? We're just preaching to the choir. So those of us that are in solidarity with us, because I'm not Black, but I'm in solidarity with African Americans. So I need to shut up and listen, and to be able to listen and learn, and then teach my people, say, hey, we can't have any anti-Blackness in our community. You gotta stop that. We gotta stop killing ourselves. And we gotta stop this Black and brown rivalry in the prisons and the streets, because we all lose. So we need to come together, even for white working class in Appalachia. They gotta stop being racist, because we have more in common with them than they have in common with Trump. There's a question of uniting, of coming together in solidarity based on values, not based on the color of the skin.
All right.
In my family, we're brown, and we have white people. We have light-skinned people. My mother had green eyes, she was light. My brother had green eyes, and he was light-skinned. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with being proud of who you are, or being Mexican, or being Central American, or being Black, being proud and not let anybody make you feel otherwise. And when I tell my students, and this is not part of the question, when they get accepted to Cal Poly Pomona, or when they get accepted to UC Berkeley, or my son, Amherst, I tell them, don't feel like they're doing you a favor. You're doing them a favor. To use an academic term, ni madre, You know, we're not here to be, oh, gracias, thank you for letting me in. They're lucky we're in. And when I talk to my white colleagues that question me and my scholarship, I say to them, where did you get your PhD? And not even white, and you know, it could be Asian colleagues or others that question my own scholarship, my own authority at Cal Poly Pomona. I said, I graduated from the best public university in the world. And that university was not even meant for me. It was not even designed for me, and I still made it. And along the ways, I was questioned, even by Black and brown people that looked like me, that I wasn't gonna make it. You're not gonna make it, Alberto. I even changed my name. So what I tell Black and brown people and white people is that we belong, and nobody's doing us a favor. And when you gain privilege, don't drink the Kool-Aid and act like you're special. Use that privilege to benefit los de abajo. You know, people like my mother.
All right.
Like
Well,
my mother, illiterate, sent 4 of her kids to the best universities and colleges in the world because of her. Not because of me. I mean, I'm good looking and funny and all that, but because of that, I learned from that immigrant work ethic. Getting up at 5 in the morning, cleaning houses, coming home, doing my bed, and setting that example. That's my role model. And I didn't learn it till later. I don't know why I'm screaming, but I didn't learn it till later.
You're a passionate guy.
Because I said to myself, there's no role models. It's just tecatos, you know, people on drugs and homeboys slinging and all that. You know, one of my friends growing up, you know, he was dealing drugs. I didn't care. I used to hang out with him. It didn't matter to me. I didn't judge him. And I thought I didn't have any role models. And later, the little foco went on, and I said, no, you know what? My mother, she was my role model. I just didn't know it till now. Because it's that drive, you know, is that drive that the immigrant has, that the more assimilated you get in this country, the lazier you get. Because I was the laziest teenager in the history of humanity. Like, I literally didn't do any homework. I was just good in math. That's why I excelled. But I just used to watch Three's Company I don't know what has to do with the question, but I just want to throw it out.
Well, just to follow, Ileana Lopez says, nuestras madrecitas valen oro. Our mothers are gold. Okay, I'm going to just take a couple more comments here. We got to kind of wrap it up. From Ramin Ganeshram, a former colleague of mine. She's a director of a history museum in New England. We have been doing work to present a holistic public history that is inclusive of all history and explains facts of history as foundational to systemic racism. The question, are there groups you can recommend for those of us who would like to formalize our roles as scholar activists in order to share learning and resources?
I think the leaders today of our country would be like the undocumented youth. You know, there are freedom fighters today, those that are unafraid, undocumented, unafraid. So I think any organization that supports the DACA, the undocumented, the young people that are leading the way are the ones that we should join and we should support. You know, I support like MALDEF and organizations like that fight on the legal grounds to push back against the orange man in the White House and his complicit GOP party. So I would suggest, you know, these different organizations that defend the more vulnerable populations among us. Sometimes, you know, I tell my students, I say, you know what, you're privileged. You might not think you're privileged because you only have like $19 in your account and you can't pull it out because you need to have $20. But I said, if you were born in this country, you're privileged. If you speak English, you're privileged. Use that privilege. Because when you speak out, like I was born in this country, so the worst thing that Trump can do to me is just deport me back to East LA. That's the only thing, because, you know, I don't live there anymore. Right? Because you're a citizen, you were born here, or if you speak the language, you know, those of us, and I'm sure many of the people here on the list, you know, they were like 10 years old, like translating for their parents. You I used to translate for my mom and dad, and one time my mom got operating the wrong leg because I said izquierda and it was derecha. You know, I got confused. But whatever privilege we have, you know, connect with the people that are more vulnerable within our communities, and to support them and use that privilege to defend them and to speak on their behalf so that they don't get deported because of their exercising the free speech.
All right. A couple more questions. One, where can people buy your book?
A store near you. It can be Amazon. Actually, even Target gets it, even though they exploit their workers. So Amazon or the press, the press that publishes, but Amazon will be the best thing. So just Álvaro Huerta and Defending Latino Immigrants, and it's only $19.99 plus tax.
All right. Kimberly Olivares has asked, how can we help others understand our struggles and open their minds to these issues?
I think the first thing we need to do, and it applies for me too, is we need to educate ourselves first in terms of our own history, our own culture, and be proud of who we are, whether we're Mexican, Central American, Native American, and then share that knowledge with others without preaching, without talking down to people. A lot of the older, you know, veteranos, like scholars, a lot of times they regañan, they scold the youth, and that doesn't work. I think what helps me in life is my son, and he's like my wife, Antonia, she's a school teacher in East LA, works with kids with special needs. So he's our number one priority, and he just turned 21. So I think connecting with him and having that connection with him as a young adult or an adult, it has taught me how to navigate and how to communicate with younger people without talking down to them, right? So just sharing information and allowing you to be questioned too. Because those of us who grew up in traditional households, like my father, you couldn't question, everything, mande usted and all that. And the fact that he had a gun, you couldn't really question how to get help, you know, clean the yard and all that. So I think part of it is to be open, to allow young people to question. Don't kill their spirits. Don't say no, like, oh, you can't do that, or whatever the case is. But to first educate ourselves and then use that knowledge and share it without trying to be patronizing or look at all these facts and data and all that, which that doesn't work. It doesn't work. At the end of the day, what works is we're telling a story. Like, what is our story? In our story of Black, Brown, Native Americans, Asians that were put in camps during World War II. In the case of Japanese Americans, they were excluded in terms of the Chinese in the 1800s, is a story of survival and perseverance and values of the family, and to share that in nuestra cultura. That's why at La Plaza, I don't want to say the other part because I forget, you know, that's what happens. Because this talk is kind of like getting close to happy hours, so it's kind of throwing me off a little. At La Plaza, what I love about La Plaza, a little plug here, is that you all don't only provide us with information about these type of lectures, brilliant lectures from Dr. Huerta. Like, this is the best lecture I've ever heard. I should hopefully you record it. But also you teach us about la cultura, like you have lectures about making food and the importance of food and the sacredness of food. Like the sacredness of corn, for example, to our indigenous people that go back thousands of years. You showcase artists, Chicano artists, and overall to show our humanity, and that we don't have to prove to anybody. We don't have to explain to anybody that we matter. We matter because we matter. We don't have to justify ourselves to others. So that's what I would recommend to people.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Alvaro. And thanks for the plug. We're always, I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm glad you're a big fan of ours. And to further plug here, I'm gonna thank you so much for this En Casa con La Plaza session. The next one coming up, a little bit on the lighter side, we have Dan Guerrero Happy Hour. This is his third hosting.
I'm gonna get a copy of my book as you talk. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, Dan Guerrero Happy Hour with guest Bel Hernandez. Bel Hernandez, you may know, she's an entertainment media mogul, the CEO president of Latin Heat Media, and she'll spill it on J-Lo, Salma Banderas, all kinds of what's going on in Latino Hollywood. There you go. A taste of mezcal. Speaking of happy hour, we're going to have an early happy hour next Monday with Jaime Mateo from Dos Javis Mezcal, talking about his family's tradition of distilling agave through the generations. So that's going to be an interesting talk. Have your shot glass ready. And finally, on next Wednesday, on DocuTales, Queer Immigrants in LA with Armando Ibanez, a filmmaker and activist Javier Mejia. Then finally, next Friday, El Son de la Nueva Generación, Beto Arcos returns with a group of excellent musicians, this time from Mexico, direct from Mexico. They'll be creating new music with traditional Mexican instruments. This is En Casa con la Plaza, okay? And to help us out with this, we have our sponsors, Walmart, AARP California, SoCal Gas. A new sponsor here. Funding has been provided by the California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities CARE Act. Thank you so much. You can catch, if you came late to this program or you want to watch it again, we welcome you to go to our website, laplazala.org, laplazala.org. All of our sessions are archived there. Also on our YouTube channel, @laplaza, youtube.com/@laplaza. Also Facebook @laplaza. And to find out other programs, come to our website, come to our Facebook page. Thank you all so much. I think I have everything here. One last thing, to support La Plaza, we invite you to become members. I'm putting right there, all you participants, a link to our membership program, so you can be the first to know when we're going to open, which will be hopefully soon, and get you in touch with all our programs that are going to be coming up. We're planning exhibitions, Chicano Moratorium. We have a couple exhibitions up that hardly anybody has seen that we're really looking forward to viewing: Afro-Latinidad, Mi Casa, My City, and Carlos Almaraz, Evolution of Form. So we have Chicano Moratorium, an exhibition being planned on the great former Congressman Edward Roybal, along with other programming. We're in touch with you. Stay in touch with us. Thank you again very much, Álvaro, and we'll see you all soon. Buenas noches y nos vemos pronto.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. The first time I was in La Plaza, I got to get it right, only 3 people showed up. Remember? It was me, Abelardo, and someone else. Only 3. I think it was my son. There was 3 of us. So I'm glad to break the record and getting more than 3. So I really appreciate everybody. You know, we're all family. We're all part of the human race. So gracias for what you do, and the executive director and everybody behind La Plaza. I 100% support your cause and everybody that is behind it to bring an alternative narrative to what it is to be Latino, Latina, Mexican American, and so on and so forth. Muchas gracias to you and everybody else.
Okay, buenas noches. We'll see you soon, Álvaro. Bye-bye, everybody. Nos vemos pronto.
Gracias.